makes you who you are? Is it your favorite band? Is it the clothes you wear? Is it how you feel about various geopolitical issues? Is it all of those things all the time? When I was told that I would be having the opportunity to speak here at TEDx, I had a minor identity crisis. Granted, I'm 17, so I have one of those like every week. So I'm asking myself that question all the time. What makes me who I am? They say that every person is unique. So what is unique about me? How am I not the same as my father was when he was my age, or my best friend is? What defines me? The truth is, I have no idea. The funny thing is, that's the question they ask you the most. At job interviews, for university admissions, when you really want to cut line at a crowded place. What makes you so special? What makes you who you are? The funnier thing is, I have answers to these questions. As it turns out, I have an answer for everybody but myself. Most people do. It just depends who asks. Sometimes, on those days when I get so bored that I start to browse cable TV, if you can imagine, I come across Shark Tank. They're on season 14. I have no idea how they've made it this far. But every time I notice something, I'm sitting there and I notice the way that these entrepreneurs pitch their products to the sharks. I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, that is so stupid. But they always know how to sell it, what to say and what not to say, and how to embellish it. And I'm thinking, it's not dissimilar to how a job interview might go. How university admissions work. A date, perhaps. There is a culture which has existed right under our noses that most of us have never thought about. And I find myself wondering, when did we start acting this way and why? Because you'll tell your potential employer that you're, resilient, determined, a perfectionist. You'll tell your date that you're kind, love your family, good with babies. You won't tell them that you can get a little bit obsessive sometimes, or that you're always late, or that you might have actually liked The Catcher in the Rye. Why would you? Why would you mention the things which make you look bad? And I agree. Who's even to say there's something wrong with embellishing yourself a little bit? Everyone does it. I do it all the time. I did it on my TEDx self-description, so I agree. But there's that question again. When did we start doing this and why? As it turns out, we can trace this behavior back to a piece of American literature from the 1970s. They proposed this model, which, as you can tell, I've put my expert drawing skills to great use. But they basically proposed this model. What you see here are two poles, which are supposed to represent the ways in which you see and express and think of your most idealized selves. Here, in red, at the pole of institution, you think of yourself as someone who, your best self is essentially someone who fits in the box. You're a rule follower, you're, great at your job, you're great at school. Those are your institutions. And they found that in the 1950s, it's a bit of a spectrum, so people are usually somewhere in the middle, but most people were bunched around the pole of institution. That's how they saw their best and most idealized selves. But then, there was this great shift from the 60s to the 70s. You had the civil rights movement. You had radical feminism rising up. And there was this shift, whatever the reason may be. And in the 70s, it was different. People were bunched up around the blue pole, the pole of impulse, where now not only do you see yourself as people who are constrained by what society wants of you, Not only are you not going to fit in that box and you don't want to, but you're led by your desires and, as the name suggests, your impulses. These were your rock stars, your artists, your dropouts. This shift is interesting to me in many ways. I'm asking myself, what does everybody else do when most people seem to have had this great shift in the way in which they see themselves? As it turns out, they keep up. Advertising changed forever in the 80s when companies realized what was really happening to their consumers. When they realized that what it really meant to be a brand could not continue the way it was going, and it was never the same. It became extremely curated, developed things. When I think of someone, the most successful and historically famous and effective marketing campaigns of all time, I think of the Coca-Cola Company. These are some ads of vintage Coca-Cola ads from the 1950s. As you can see, you've got like families, distributing the drink. You've got this promise and quality. They're talking about how great Coke is. All the adverts are about Coke, and they'd only just started calling it that instead of like the full Coca-Cola. That's what I see in all of these ads. But come the 80s, and there's a completely different story being told. What do you see? You see like families, aprons? Because I don't. I see friends, maybe couples, free, laughing, and certainly not at their day jobs. Coke itself seems to have drifted a little bit into the background. It's still there, it's just not the most important thing about the ad anymore. When a person looks at these adverts, what's really being advertised to them is not the drink, it's the look on that guy's face. You see yourself in the commodity and you think to yourself, I want to be that. He looks so uninhibited, he looks free. You think, I want to be uninhibited, I want to be free. And strangely, full circle, you get up, you go, and you buy the commodity. All the great companies were doing this at this time. It wasn't just Coke, it was everybody. Everyone was selling these ideas. What it meant to be a brand was never, ever the same. And that's when those lines between consumer and commodity started to blur a little bit for the first time. And they never stopped blurring. They haven't stopped for a second since. 1997, that's Tom Peters. He comes out with this article. He calls it The Brand Called You. It's about how you should start thinking of yourself as me incorporated, and you should start thinking of yourself like a brand. Starting today, you are a brand. That's what he was saying. And it reached millions, if not tens of millions of people. Just like that, this was one of the best ways to excel in the workplace, to be who you wanted to be this curated, identifiable brand, rather than maybe who you actually were. Now, here we are, present day. These sorts of posts aren't hard to find, maybe like 5 minutes on Google. And almost every single word that's been used on either of them is some sort of allusion to media consumption or like this very curated symbol that's supposed to tell us something about the creators. Now, I don't think that consuming good media, enjoying good art is a problem. I don't think that's it at all. I think to some extent our identities are shaped by the things that we like to consume, the art which we like to enjoy. So consuming good art is not the problem. Whatever that guy is doing with his arms, he should definitely stop, but that's not the problem either. The problem arises when these sorts of niche references are some of the only things that people actually know about themselves. And it's a lot more common than you might think. Marx described a commodity as something which is bought and sold in a relationship of trade that is then going to be exploited by the economy that it's a part of. So what this whole speech is about, what it says there, self-commodification, should essentially be a bit of a misnomer. I mean, how can you buy and sell yourself? It shouldn't be possible. Because as it happens, it's like really easily. When yourselves are defined by the commodities which you're consuming, when what it means to be you is dictated by what a stranger thinks about you based on, what you're wearing, when you're doing certain things to look a certain way, that's when you self-commodify. When you only know who you are through pitless references to like indie music videos, that's when you self-commodify. And I don't know one person in my whole life who isn't guilty of that, even a little bit. Not one. Including me. I'm guilty of that in a really, really big way. I mean, this time last year, I couldn't listen to music unless it was like alternative enough. And I had a hard time writing in my journal without thinking about the people who might read it once I was done. It's small things like that, too. Self-commodification is a tricky thing to talk about. It's a big word, for one thing. It's really difficult to navigate, for another thing. But it's also ingrained into the type of person that we come to be in a society like this. When you're worrying about what other people think of you, to what extent does that erase your authenticity? How long can we progress until we lose sight of who we really are and what it really means to be us? It's woven into the fabric of not only all of our important conversations, but into that question. What makes you who you are? When I was writing this speech, thinking about everything in context with, behind my desk with my glasses pushed up to like here, I had a minor identity crisis. Again. I was just thinking about everything, about what all of this meant. And I'm 17. I'm still going to be figuring out everything that's happening with me, my identity, for a really long time. And I think that's true for every person in this room. So why waste those years equating an iPhone with how progressive you might be? Reading books in public because of how smart it might make you seem? Why? What makes you who you are? What makes me who I am? I don't think it is my signature scent or my favorite band. But giving these speeches, talking about the things which I think are important or significant or interesting, continuing to wonder when I'll finally figure everything out, I think those are some things which define me. Thank you.